Well, thank everybody for coming tonight. Is the sound in here okay with this? Everybody? Okay. Tonight we're here to have another meeting to talk about the proposed changes to the CC&Rs, and there'll be, to try to explain that and an opportunity for questions, if you have any questions that you want to ask. We had a similar meeting over at the Aspen Lodge last week, and so we're going to do this here, and then we can even do another one if there's enough demand for it, but let's see how this goes tonight. The format, I think we want to do the same thing that we did last week, and that's basically, we'll start with some comments to explain why we've asked for these changes and what these changes mean, and then we'll open it up to the floor for any questions that anybody wants to ask. What we'll do, just to make sure that everybody has a fair chance, we'll ask that if you do have a question, you raise your hand, we'll identify you. You can ask the question. Please ask a question, and then we'll pass it around to everybody else. And last time we had several people ask multiple questions because we were able to go around, but I prefer to do it that way. If you ask one question and then it's somebody else's turn, so that we don't get into the mode of somebody asking 14 questions and trying to, and then somebody else doesn't have a chance to ask anything. So that'll be kind of the ground rules for tonight. With that, we can get started. I think everybody knows we have the full board here tonight. I'm Tony Faconis. I'm the current president. And does everybody want to introduce themselves?
Dave Hughes, Vice President.
I'm Curtis Chan, I'm the Secretary.
I'm Ray Lee, I'm the Treasurer.
Danielle Kirby, Vice President.
Okay, let's start with I'd like to just make some comments to try to set some context for why we're doing this and what's going on. There have been a lot of questions. I've seen a lot of internet postings and rumors and all kinds of things going around. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so I'd like to address some of those to start with, and then we'll move into more of the technical details. One of the things that I've seen popping up quite a bit seems to be that some people believe we're trying to either change the definition of what a majority is or change the definition of what a quorum is, supposedly to make it easier for this board to, or for any future board for that matter, to pass things. Okay? That is absolutely not true. Nothing in these changes actually changes the definitions that are already in place in our CC&Rs. Okay? In our CC&Rs, there are a number of different requirements for voting levels for different things. Okay? And there's a number of different quorums as well. And some of the materials that I've seen seem to try to confuse those two. They jump back and forth between what's a vote and what's a quorum. And they're very different. All the quorum does is establish whether enough people have voted to make the vote legitimate. The term majority means exactly what everybody thinks it means. It means more than half. So by definition, that's 50% plus one of all the votes that are cast. Okay, so we do have a number of different standards by our rules and to some extent by NRS. For example, in order to amend the CC&Rs, and this relates to the numbers that were on the bottom of the ballot, our requirement to amend CC&Rs is that you have to have the affirmative vote of 51% or more of the units eligible to vote. That's specifically for amending CC&Rs. In that sense, there is no quorum for that vote. Either you get 51% or more of the total possible votes from everybody who's eligible to vote in the association, or you don't. There's not a quorum that sets a standard that says, okay, we have enough votes, now we have to see what the majority is. You might be interested to know, if you read the CCRs, if we wanted to get rid of all the CC&Rs, just get rid of them, that only takes 50% plus one. So it's easier to do that than it is to amend the CC&Rs. I just ran across that one. But most of the votes require a majority, which is the 50% plus one. In terms of quorum, for example, for the board to have a quorum, you have to have 66%, two-thirds of the board members. So in our case, two-thirds is like 3.5 people, so it rounds up to 4 people. So for a board meeting, we have to have at least 4 board members to conduct the meeting, and then a majority is a vote of at least 3 out of the 4 or 5, whoever are there. Okay? For a homeowner vote, and this applies to any vote that, except for the ones specifically identified, like changing CC&Rs, we have special rules for approving the budget. There are special rules for recalling directors. But for anything that's not covered by one of the special rules, okay, a quorum, according to our CC&Rs, and our CC&Rs basically just defer to current Nevada law, a quorum is constituted by 20%, or at least 20% of the total voting members. Okay? Now, the fact that you have a quorum doesn't mean that those 20% get to decide, or 10% plus 1 decides. It's still a majority of the total number of votes cast. Okay? So, what's that mean? I mean, that, I've seen a number of things that I think are really trying to convince people that somehow, if you agree with these CC&R changes, that you're going to have a group of potentially 248 people, I think is the number, in the middle of the night that somehow sneak around and pass something that everybody has to live with. Okay? That's just not going to happen. Okay? It's pretty much the same as saying, yeah, a meteor is going to come through here and destroy this room. It's going to fall right through. It's possible, but it's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen for the votes is pretty simple, because you can't take all those things in isolation. We also have rules, for example, that say everybody has to get written notification of a vote. Okay? And we have to allow a reasonable amount of time for the vote to take place. So what's that mean? That means in the real world, okay, the only way you can have these scare scenarios of, 248 people deciding the fate of Somerset is if, in fact, 2,478 people get notices of a vote and almost 2,000 of them all just say, I'm not going to bother. I don't really care which way it goes. So the only way that the 248 number that keeps getting bounced around actually works is literally if exactly 496 people vote, and that's all that vote. Because if even one more person votes, the number goes up from 248 to 249. If 1,000 people vote, the number is 501. If 2,000 people vote, it's 1,001 that have to be voting to approve. So, I mean, as a practical matter, it seems to me the only scenario I can think of where you can have this small group in the middle of the night deciding things is if the issue is so unimportant that 2,000 people, 2,000 members in Somerset decide not to vote. So, I mean, you guys can decide for yourself what the feasibility of that is. But the fact is, the 20% number only establishes whether the vote is legitimate. After that, it's the majority of the total number of votes that are cast. And similarly, if 495 people vote instead of 496, doesn't matter how many vote in favor. It's not a quorum. It's not a legitimate vote. That's the purpose of the quorum. So hopefully that'll will.
I just want to point out something too. In the last homeowner board election,
There were over 1,000 votes cast by eligible voters, by homeowners, voting for various board members, board member candidates. So we've had a fairly good history in terms of voter turnout when we have had asked homeowners to vote on matters.
Okay. So the final thing on that, just to wrap that whole thing up, is that we are not changing what constitutes a quorum or what constitutes a majority. Whether you vote for or against the CC&R changes, the requirement of a 20% homeowner quorum and a majority vote for anything homeowners vote on that's not one of the special situations, that's the way it's going to be, whatever happens to the CC&R changes. So that is not even a consideration in this vote. The other one I wanted to address that I saw come up more than once is the idea that somehow the reason we're asking for these changes of the CC&Rs is to make it easier to somehow slip past you all a deal with the golf course. Okay? And that also is absolutely not true because the two actually don't affect each other. And the reason is this. The reason is, well, first of all, we still don't have a deal. So, but if we do, we have already made a commitment, including to the Department of Real Estate, that will go to a homeowner vote. So if we are able to reach an agreement with the golf course, whether or not the CC&Rs are approved or disapproved, there still will be a homeowner vote. And the homeowners will be able to decide whether they want us to proceed with that deal or not. So that's, that kind of is another red herring in this whole approach to dealing with these things. So I just wanted to clarify that that's going to be a vote anyway, and that is the reason why I saw one thing that said, why did they, talk about town center and the loft when we've got this big issue. The reason is that's what these changes with CC&R are going to allow us to do, is deal with some of the things that we're trying to do elsewhere in Somerset. The golf course deal, if it happens, is going to a vote no matter what. So you're going to have a say on that. Okay. So with that, let me move into the actual CC&R. Yeah.
So I'm Curtis. I was kind of debating about whether or not I should say anything because anything that gets said around here suddenly turns into a political hotbed. But I thought I would just give you guys some ideas of, because I don't speak up that much in terms of the meetings. Generally, Tony and Ray did a little bit more vocal about things. But I wanted to state that being on the board is hard. It takes a lot of time, and I don't want to disappoint anyone here, but we really don't have enough time to scheme and do a lot of things with trying to put pieces together that we are reading about that people are thinking that we're doing. We're basically trying to make decisions daily essentially, on the things that happen in the community. And it's a big job. And sometimes we get them right, and sometimes we get them wrong. And sometimes we are being pushed on a timeline that has to happen. In this case, a vote has to happen on something, and we're trying to save some money by trying to get something else included in that vote, and maybe that's not the right thing to do. And I didn't go over this agenda with my fellow board members when I'm telling you about these things to run it by them. We don't work like that. We're individual people. We try to get together to solve problems. And so there are problems that are presented to us, and we try to do the best job we can. And sometimes it doesn't come out right. And sometimes, from the perspective I can see from the other side, it may look like, well, it seems so odd that they're behaving this way, or they're not communicating with us, or things like that. And I have to say that being on the board, I'm exceptionally afraid of saying or doing anything because I might get sued. And so we have attorneys that we speak to weekly about every issue that goes on. And unfortunately, we can't communicate all those things because it takes already enough time to do the jobs that we're doing that we don't have time to put out a bulletin every time about things that we're doing. So I apologize for the people who are feeling that there's some nefarious agenda that is going on, because in my opinion, we're just trying to act in the best interest of the community. And yes, some of us are golf course members, and some of us are not golf course members. But to be honest, I've told the other board members here that as a golf course member, I'm exceptionally critical of any deal that goes on because it looks bad to me if I vote for something. I feel like I have to really bend over backwards to make sure the deal is as fair as possible. But then there are a lot of legal ramifications and financial ramifications for the decisions that we make. It's not so simple as just make a decision. We have to worry about what happens to the community, what happens to ourselves personally when we make those decisions. So, again, as we go over these things today, I mean, I'll say that some of the questions that have come up, I was a bit surprised by that came up in the last meeting because, in my opinion, we didn't consider them. We ran it by the attorney. The attorney said this is what we should do. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to get it out in front of you guys in advance and hear the feedback. And it went out probably before we felt it was probably ready. But it's out there now. We still think the intent is good. Whether it passes or not, you guys will make that decision. And if it's not good, then we'll go back and redo it again. But the point here is that I'm a bit saddened by the fact that I ran for the board because I thought I was helping the community. And I'm afraid that we're coming down into kind of a civil war here. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we're all one community. And I'm speaking now for all the board members. Nobody represents one side or the other. We represent the community. We just have different viewpoints on things. So, anyway, that's my comment there. Is that as we go through this today, I hope people will kind of step back and understand that. I mean, it's hard for you guys to not, for those of you who might be polarized on this issue, think that we have some nefarious agenda. And I would say that it's the furthest thing from that. If anything, we're kind of more on the side of maybe we're a little bit hesitant to do things, and it appears that there's some grand scheme going on because we can't move as quickly as we would like or be as decisive as we would like, so things don't happen as quickly, and we're not able to communicate that to you. So, again, I mean, ask the questions. We need to hear the questions. We need to hear the feedback. But, again, I hope that people understand that going forward that there was no grand scheme other than to try to allow us to do things more efficiently and to define things more clearly than they have been. And so I've seen some postings that say that, it's expanding our powers. In fact, from our perspective, it actually was defining the powers that were not defined. But I can see why people might say that those things were happening. But again, in the law, intent has very little value, but I'm just telling you the intent was to try to do the right thing. Sometimes the right thing doesn't come out in that way. So anyway, thanks for your time.
Okay, we'll go right into the actual changes. Now keep in mind that these changes will only apply to acquisition, purchase, lease, or annexation of real property. So we're talking about if we're going to bring more land or lease a building or lease space inside a building, that's the only thing that these apply to. The first point that defines the majority percentage vote, what this really does, this ties into what I was saying earlier, really all this does is conform what you need for these actions with what are already in our CC&Rs, the standards for homeowner votes as opposed to board votes. Okay, so that's why there's, we wrote it or the attorney wrote it in terms of just saying, referring to the quorum. If, in the future, somebody changes what it means to have a quorum for a homeowner vote under our CC&Rs, that means it automatically changes for these actions as well. But right now, this just adopts the same rules that are in place. A majority is a majority and a quorum is a quorum according to how our CC&Rs already define. We are not changing anything in that regard. Okay. Then what this really is to clarify, and I use the word clarify on purpose because there has been a lot of debate about what the CC&Rs actually allow or don't allow. And different attorneys have said different things at different times about that. So what we're trying to do is clarify with regard to this idea of either purchasing or, when I say this, by the way, I tend to drop out acquiring because acquiring that's not a purchase to me is somebody gives it to us. So, I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm really focusing on purchasing, leasing, and annexing land. And the annexing is simply bringing it into the association as common element, okay, as a common area. In fact, if you read the CC&Rs, it is with some ambiguity, but they actually say that we can do most of this stuff with the developer's approval. One of the things people may not really understand is that the developer reserved the right to himself to bring in land or do stuff like that for 30 years. We don't believe that we want to have the developer hanging on, we have to go ask him every time and have him involved in the internal decisions of Somerset. We think that's better done between whoever your board is at the time and whoever the homeowners are at the time. So what we're trying to do is clarify that the board does have the authority for these real property transactions, but we're also trying to put some limits on it. Because under the CC&Rs right now, certainly you can argue whether the board has the authority or not, but to the extent that it does, there are no limits. There is nothing in the current CC&Rs that say, if the board wants to spend more than $1 million, it has to go to a homeowner vote, or anything like that. It's just not in there right now. So that's what we're trying to do. And what we did as a board, we had a discussion about this, and we tried to come up with a number that we thought was reasonable in light of the size of the association and the way the association is growing, so that things that need to be done quickly could be done fairly quickly, and things, but not give the board unlimited authority. And as a matter of judgment, we chose $500,000. Right now, we're about a $4.5 million business. We're growing fairly rapidly. We will ultimately probably somewhere in the $7 million range, $7.5 million range. The reason that we chose that number, and like I said, I emphasize it was a judgment call. There's not a scientific calculation behind it or anything. But the reason we chose that number is that typically what we found is for smaller things, like this lot that the previous board, this board tried to buy. Every time we've tried to buy that, other bidders have shown up. Okay, smaller things like that, you typically have to move faster. Okay, if we were going to try to buy the entire town center for whatever reason, that would, there are not going to be a lot of people competing with that. There's plenty of time to deal with that. And by the way, we're not trying to buy the town center. I just want to clarify that. And as an aside, that's one of the other comments that people seem to think maybe we're trying to do that. No, what we were trying to do and what was written in the letter, what we would like to do is be able to enforce the CC&Rs for the town center. You may or may not know this. The town center has its own set of CC&Rs, but right now they're not enforced by anybody because you need to have a certain amount of voting authority, and the voting authority does not go by 3 out of the 5 lots. It goes by the percentage of acreage, which is controlled. And if the association was able to buy this little lot right here, that would give us the authority to enforce CC&Rs, and that's all about making sure the lights are kept up on the roof lines, being able to enforce that we don't have proliferation of signs in all kinds of colors and sizes everywhere. We don't have RV storage on the parking lot and stuff like that. That's what, when we talk about getting some control out here, we're talking about being able to enforce CC&Rs, not getting into business in any way out there. So I just wanted to clarify that. Anyway, back to the CC&R change. What we're really saying here is that for the purpose of buying land, that the cutoff would be $500,000. There's actually 2 pieces to the catch. One is if it's less than $500,000, and also if it can be accommodated, if it can be paid for within the current assessment authority of the board. Okay, and this gets a little tricky, but I'll try to get this right for everybody. What that really means, right now, under your CC&Rs, right now already, And under Nevada law, all homeowner boards have an authority to change assessments, to raise assessments, or to impose special assessments within certain limits. In our CC&Rs, the board actually has the authority to raise the monthly assessments by up to 15%. I don't think any board would ever do that because they wouldn't stay around as a board very long, I suspect. But they do have that authority, and all the future boards will have that authority. There's a similar authority with special assessments. It's actually up to 25% of what the annual assessments are. Okay, but within those limits, okay, a board can act without a homeowner vote. That's the way the rules are right now. Okay, so what we're saying is, if we already can pay for it in the current assessment, or technically we had to put in within this 15% increase, because technically the law does give a board authority. That's why the words are written the way they are. But if we have to meet both those standards, if it's less than $500,000 and it can be paid for without triggering something else that requires a homeowner vote, the board can do it. If it's more than $500,000, and in my mind, the $500,000 is really the controlling thing. I can't possibly see somebody raising, assessments that much in one fell swoop. Because, by the way, homeowners do have the authority on their own to call meetings and to recall board members and to do all that kind of stuff. So you can do that on your own. And that, by the way, is the 20% quorum as well. So if that was 50%, it makes it almost impossible for homeowners to take action unilaterally. Okay, but those avenues are open. Again, you got to look at all the different rules. And so, if it's within those limits, we're saying the board has the authority to do it. But we're also saying if it exceeds $500,000, it has to go to a homeowner vote. That limit is not in the CC&Rs right now. Okay, the same thing with annexing land. Okay, if the land is worth more than $500,000, it has to go to a homeowner vote. Okay. Right now, quite frankly, if we really wanted to do that, if we were really as nefarious as some people think we are, we could literally go down to the developer's office and say, hey, Mr. Smith, would you approve this? And bam, it's done. And that's it. That could be done under our current CC&Rs. But we're actually putting a limit on that to say you have to have a homeowner vote. Okay. For a lease, the way the attorney wrote this, he didn't put in the $500,000 limit, but that I understand is because leases don't have market value in the same way. So yeah, you can calculate the number of lease payments, but then you can play games with the lease payments to get under a limit. So it basically says that if it can be paid for by the board within its own authority, it doesn't need a homeowner vote. But if it exceeds that authority, you still have to have a homeowner vote. And I think one of the main things in here, which I would expect would be very important to people, is that the issue, if you look at the changes down in section 16, which was under item 4 in the text of the assessment, this has to do with special assessments for the purpose of acquiring or annexing or leasing. Whatever. Let me just, yeah. Okay. What this says, remember I just said that the board actually has all boards, well, I won't say that. This board under our CC&Rs in Nevada law has the authority to impose special assessments if they need to, up to 25% of the annual assessment without any vote of the homeowner. What we've got in here, it says, if a board wants to impose a special assessment for the purpose of buying, leasing land, it has to have a homeowner vote. There's no minimum limit. We're saying we think there ought to be a homeowner vote if anybody wants to do a special assessment. So that is substantially more restrictive than our current rules are. Okay? And I want to touch on just the last one. Expenditure of annual assessments as capital improvements. Here's an area where there was really a hole in our CC&Rs. And I don't know the history, I don't know why it wasn't there, if it was an oversight. But as we've talked about at several board meetings, we've definitely, we've done this survey, and one of the things that come out is people definitely expect the board, whether it's this board or future boards, to keep up with the population growth in terms of providing amenities and keeping up with landscaping and all that kind of good stuff, okay? Which will, at some point, require some capital improvements. Our CC&Rs, as they're currently written, allow us to budget for operating costs and for maintenance costs and for reserves, but they don't actually allow us to set up capital accounts within our budget so we can put money away a little at a time, so that if we've got community growth and the strategic planning committee does a bunch of work and comes out and convinces all of us, the board and the homeowners, that we need to build a new swimming pool one day, 5 years from now, we think it'd be a whole lot better if we could put some money away a little at a time, so that when we get to that point, we don't have to say, oh geez, now we got to come up with $1 million next week. And whether that's, a loan or a special assessment or whatever it is, that's going to be a shock to a lot of people. Right now, we do not have the authority to actually set up a capital account that we can put a little bit of money in out of assessments. We do have a capital account, but the way it works, it was set up, it only works whenever a house is sold in Somerset, some money goes into this account. Okay, so we have that, but as you know from the last few years, that builds up unevenly. Let's say if the real estate market's strong, it builds up, maybe fairly quickly. But if the real estate market's weak, we don't have any way to budget for capital items. So we are asking for the authority to allow the budget to include a capital account. And of course, all the rules around budgeting are still in place. The budgeting is something that's done in open workshops every year. It's provided to all the members every year. There is a mechanism whereby members can reject the budget. And by the way, again, back on the conspiracy theories about what we're trying to slide past people and stuff like that, regardless of the time period or dollar amount that might have to do with one of these actions, it has to show up in the annual budget. If the money isn't there to pay for it, it can't be done. So, if that's the case, you also have that mechanism. Every year, you get to review the next annual budget and vote on it. So that's basically what we're trying to do. I think, we basically want to clarify what authority this board and future boards have without the developer being around. Okay, and specifically just for this question of purchasing, leasing, annexing land. Okay, we want to put some reasonable limits on that so that the board can act for smaller transactions within its own authority. It still has to have open meetings, we still have to vote, we still have to tell you what's going on. None of that changes, but it allows the board to act in certain cases, but it also puts limits on the board that says if you want to do something really big, you have to have a homeowner vote. Okay, and we're trying to put in a limit that says specifically if you want a special assessment to do any of these things, you have to have a homeowner vote with no minimum amount at all. So that in a nutshell is, I think, what we're trying to do. I'll ask my colleagues if they have any comments they want to add, and then when we do that, we can get to questions.
So as treasurer of the homeowner association, I just want to mention the possibility or what's allowed within NRS, what's allowed within our CC&Rs in terms of assessment increases. As treasurer, I'm going to tell you that I don't foresee an increase in monthly assessments in the near future, medium term. And the reason why I don't foresee an increase in assessments is because Somerset is a growing community. When you have a growing community, what you have is you have more, the possibility of more assessment paying units into the association. So we continue to grow. We actually think that probably over the next 10 years, the size of the community will probably grow about, I'm going to round this off, it's different year by year, but by about 100 units per year over the next year. Today, we have about 2,500 units within the association. The developer, when he was in control, said that the allowable limit under the current, let's say, permits or PUDs, roughly 3,700 units. Our own projections say that we don't think we're going to get to 3,700 units, but certainly 3,400 to 3,500 units in total over the next 10 years is a real possibility. So even though Tony talked about the possibility of assessment increases, special assessments, as treasurer, I just don't foresee that occurring in the near term or medium term.
Yeah, let me just add to that a thought, because I think the best indicator of what is likely to happen is what's already happened. Okay, I mean, if we really had some secret plans, we could have pushed through a 15% increase this year. We didn't, right? Everything stayed the same. And in fact, what we also did, which has never been done before in Somerset, is we put together a finance committee that has, how many homeowners? 5 non-board member homeowners on it, who are right at the center of putting together the budget. So that's another level of transparency that just didn't exist before. It's a level of participation and transparency. And participating in some of the workshops this year, they took that very seriously. And I think that there's a good reason to have confidence in what the Finance Committee put out as a proposed budget for next year. And that's the process that is going to happen year after year going forward. So I think that's just part of the message is look at what's going on and look at how many safeguards are built into the system, because there is nothing that this association or the membership group as the association can do that only is governed by one rule. Okay, there's lots and lots of different interacting pieces here which should give us all some comfort in this. Because, I mean, I'm a homeowner, and I certainly don't plan on being on the board forever, so I don't want the next board or the one after that to start doing, crazy stuff either, any more than you guys do. So, any other comments anybody like to have? We'll open it up for questions. Okay, let's open it up for questions then. Does anybody have any questions? Jim.
Yeah, I think one of the areas of concern that a lot of people had, Tony, was with regard to the requirements for leasing. Now, on the purchase of property, you established a $500,000 limit before it can go to, after which it has to go to homeowner approval. The clause with the leasing has no limit, and therefore, going forward, a board could approve multi-million-dollar leases without getting homeowner approval. And you mentioned that it was hard to put a market value on leases. Well, why can't you? What's that?
I said it wasn't the same as a purchase price.
Okay, but I see no reason why you couldn't have put a limit on entering into leases over $500,000 or whatever number you wanted to apply to it. So I'd like to ask, why didn't you put a limit on that provision? Because it does raise some suspicions, okay?
Yeah, I think the honest answer to that is that's the way the attorney drafted it, and we didn't catch that. I think is the honest answer. But the other thing, though, I think that one of the reasons why we're not as concerned about that is because if you look around, the question is, where can you do a lease of real property for that much money that would actually be usable to the association? Because the association is not allowed, the board is not allowed to do things like that as investments or as just for fun if it's down in downtown Reno or things like that. So, the question is, where would it come into play? And I suppose if we wanted to lease, 100 acres or something around here on the edges of Somerset or somewhere else, I suppose that's possible, but I just don't see where, how it's gonna, I don't see where you would use that. So I guess that's why we missed it. It was drafted that way by the attorney. It all came together kind of quickly because we needed to get it out we wanted to do it with the vote to avoid the expense of having a second mailing and multiple mailings. We're going to have to do another one anyway for the golf course deal vote, assuming that a deal happens. So we were just trying to get this done at the same time to piggyback it on. And I think that's the honest answer, Jim, is...
Well, what you're saying then is the country club lease agreement wouldn't fall under that clause.
Well, explain to me what property we're leasing from the country club.
We got entire country club property according to the lease.
That's what it says.
Explain to me from what we're getting, what did we lease from the country
I
club?
can't explain
It's
it,
the-
but
it's
what you're
I
saying,
get it, yeah.
yeah, I can't
Okay.
explain it. I can walk all by.
That's all I'm saying, is that this is very specific for certain things, and other things, especially with regard to the country club, you all get to vote on anyway. So, and that doesn't change whether you accept or reject this. So you can decide, if that's a big issue to you, Jim, you can decide to vote against it because of the lease thing, and if that's more important than putting limits on how much a board can do or special assessments or things like that, you can vote that. Everybody's got to make up their own mind.
Mike, you've been very adamant about pointing out that if there's a new country club lease agreement proposed, that we would all have a vote, a homeowner's vote. My question is, where was that vote the first time around?
I wasn't here the first time around, so I can't address that. I mean, quite frankly, if you read the CC&Rs, there is no requirement for a vote on an arrangement like that. Okay, there's no requirement to ask, to have homeowner votes on amenities. We decided we think we should, and that's why we made that commitment, okay? But there is no requirement, at least that anybody's ever shown me, in either the CC&Rs or NRS for that kind of a situation. So that's just, again, those rules are the rules that we were all given. And so we've got the right to change them. But, that's, we got to do that a little bit at a time if we want to do that. Ed had his hand up.
I just have a question about, maybe everybody can hear. With regard to leases, there are such things as capitalized leases. In accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, we might be required to capitalize that lease on the balance sheet of the association. And so therefore, you are establishing a limit or an amount that you're committing the association to on a capitalized basis. Kind of a technical question, but
Well, I didn't get the question.
Ray might be able to react to that.
I understand the question.
I agree with what you said.
We don't have it.
The board will, yes. The board would have to deal with that if the situation came up. And that would have to be discussed in the open meeting.
No, you're required to use it.
Yeah, just point out two things. One is the current country club lease is very specific in saying it's leasing the property and it describes the property. Which is literally the entire property of the country club. And secondly, in an earlier meeting, you alluded to a possible
I
arrangement.
didn't understand it. You're saying the existing lease says
Yes.
we're leasing
Yes.
the entire property?
Yes, read it. Read it.
I have read it. Anyway.
That's what it says. It has a description of the entire scheme operation.
Okay.
Okay? But at an early meeting, you alluded to a potential arrangement whereby the club would build a building and we would lease part of it. Is that still being tossed around?
Well,
And how does this bear on that?
okay. The honest answer is this does not bear on that. Okay. As to whether something's still being talked about or not, we're not going to discuss the country club deal or lack thereof tonight. As soon as we have a deal, if we get a deal, and when I say deal, what we're saying is if we get an agreement for a letter of intent, which is still a ways from an actual deal, but if we get that, we will let people know, and then we will have meetings to describe what that entails. But I can tell you just from the experience, and it's been a much longer experience than I expected when this started. This whole path has so many twists and turns and interrelated pieces and things that come out of left field that until we have a deal, I'm no longer going to say I think we're close to a deal. I said that last time and it kind of came around and bit me. So, but as soon as we know whether we've got agreement on the main pieces, we will let people know. We will schedule information sessions like we did, and I would envision, quite frankly, that we're going to have a number of them if it comes to that, because just because I think that people are going to have a lot of questions and so forth, but we will do that, and we'll take whatever time it needs to explain it, and we'll go from there. But these changes were not, at least I don't think of them, quite frankly, as having much to do at all with any potential deal with the golf course, because, like I said, no matter what you vote on for these, you will vote on a golf course deal if we have a golf course deal.
I had asked last week and you didn't have an answer. If there is a vote on a golf course deal, what's going to be the requirement? How many votes is it going to take?
Yeah, that's a good question, okay? And what we will do, we have not sought the legal opinion for that yet because we didn't want to spend that money until we knew whether we were going to have or likely have a deal. Every time we ask for a legal opinion, it probably costs between, at a minimum, $1,000 and $3,000 and sometimes more. However, for what it's worth, my interpretation would be that, from what I've read of the CC&Rs and stuff like that, but then I'm not a lawyer, but my interpretation would be the normal, it's a piece of homeowner business. So the normal rules that apply to any homeowner business that isn't one of the special cases like electing a board or changing CC&R, stuff like that, I assume that's what will apply. But I don't really know. But if we get a signed letter of intent, one of the things we're going to do then is seek a formal legal opinion. And given our situation that we have this stipulation with the Nevada Department of Real Estate, I would assume we're going to tell them everything as we go down the road. We're going to tell them when we get a letter of intent. We're going to tell them when we have a signed agreement. I assume we'll give it to them if they want to look at it. And so I think there'll be ample opportunity for different parties to weigh in on the vote requirement. But right now, we do not have a legal opinion because, quite frankly, I think that's putting the cart before the horse in terms of not even knowing whether we have the possibility of a deal yet.
And the district attorney may stipulate one
Right.
as well.
She may very well.
What did you say? I didn't hear that.
The district attorney may stipulate
The
what is required.
Deputy Attorney General, who's
I can address that. The Attorney General's office will not stipulate that, okay?
Well, if that's the case,
So that's a little bit of a misleading statement.
well, we didn't know because we haven't asked her yet.
Oh.
Okay, that's why I say we haven't bothered pursuing this because we didn't think we thought that was putting the cart before the horse. But if what you say is true, then I would assume this would be treated as a normal homeowner vote under the existing CC&Rs.
What percentage is that? Would that be the 20% then, Tony?
20% for a quorum, but a majority of votes cast.
Okay.
So if that issue comes up and we notify 2,478 homeowners that there's going to be a vote, I can't possibly imagine the majority, I can't imagine 2,000 of you are going to ignore it. I just don't see that happening.
Could you please explain what these changes for the CC&Rs are going to do to the votes that are required right now?
Nothing. We're not changing the votes that are required right now.
Because the way I read it, and I looked at the NRS 116,
Right.
and I compared it with the CC&Rs as they're written right now, it appears to me that if these changes go into effect, you could have 10 people show up and vote, and if 6 approved the measure, it would pass.
No.
Where does it say in these changes
Okay.
what the requirements are for a number of people?
What
How
our,
many people will have to vote?
our change, what the change is here, the very first thing, it's entitled the majority percentage vote. What that simply does is, as far as it reiterates what the current rules are. It basically says that what is meant by a majority percentage vote, which is the term used later on for purchasing land over $500,000, for example. It says you got to have a majority vote. What that means is you need to have the affirmative vote of a majority of the votes cast, as long as more than the quorum number have been cast in total. So you have to, I mean, what that really says, under the least restrictive case, okay, right now, if we have 2,478 units, okay, it says that 20% of that, I think it's 496. Somebody check my math for me. Okay. If we don't get 496 votes, if we get 495 votes, even if it's 494 to 1 in favor, it does not count because we did not have a quorum. We have to have a quorum in order for the vote to be legitimate. Once you get above the quorum number, the only significance of the quorum number is that you now have a legitimate vote if you exceed that number. If we have, more than 496, it means whatever the outcome of the vote is legitimate. But the majority is still the majority of however many votes are cast. So if we have 1,000 votes, if we have 1,200 votes, if we have 1,800 votes, whatever the number is, you have to have the majority, 50% plus 1 vote, of that total number in order to pass it.
So you're saying the quorum will not change?
We're not changing the quorum, we're not changing the definition of majority. Yeah, well, that's, I think the way he wrote it, using quorum instead of saying a number, is so that it automatically changes with all the other parts of our CC&Rs if at some future date we do change what a quorum is. We do have the authority. Right now, our CC&Rs basically say, in layman's terms, it says basically, we defer to the standard at NRS for what is a quorum for a homeowner vote. Okay? So the legislature, and right now NRS says 20% is the number. The legislature, next time they're in session, could change that to 25% or 30%, and it will automatically change for us as well. We do have the ability to go in and change that number in our CC&Rs. We can make it whatever number we want, but that requires an amendment to the CCRs. And an amendment to the CCR requires 51% or more of total units voting in favor of it. There's no minimum quorum there. Either you have 51% or you don't. And the only thing that counts are the final votes when it comes to changing CC&Rs. So it does get a little confusing because I've got a list right here that I went through today. I found 7 different voting requirements for different things. So it does get somewhat confusing. But, the 20% vote is the quorum. 20% is the quorum. The vote is actually determined by how many total votes are cast.
As long as it reaches the quorum.
As long as it reaches the quorum. If it doesn't reach the quorum, then it's not legitimate and nothing will
I wish it
change.
was more clearly written.
Well, I apologize for that if it's not clear, but those are our current rules, and we are not changing the current rules.
So just to make sure I understand, in order for the CC&R to pass, it's important that we get at least 50% of the homeowners, 51 to vote.
The changes for CC&R, the changes for CC&Rs, to amend the CC&R
CC&Rs is one of the special cases. It's outlined, it doesn't fall under that. And changing the CC&R does require at least 51%. 51% of total eligible voters.
So it's important for the homeowners, whether they agree with it or disagree with it, to get out and vote, I guess is my point. If you
Well-
want to have a chance of it passing.
Well, no, it's actually, well, yeah, I mean, it's important. We want everybody to vote if they would.
Right.
But the standard for changing the CC&Rs is very simple. It's you have to have at least 51% of the total possible votes. So right now we've got 2,478 units. We have to have 51% of them voting to approve. You have to have 51% positive votes. Okay, quorum doesn't enter into changing CC&Rs. It's either you get the positive vote or you don't. Okay, and not to make it confusing, but there's actually a provision where we can go to court to change that, but hopefully we'll never get there. So,
Thank you.
yeah, 51% to change CC&R, 51% positive vote to change CC&Rs.
Looking through the CC&Rs, a lot of reference to the declare. Why don't we stop and review the whole CC&Rs and amend everything all at once instead of doing it piecemeal? And I think that's in the best interest of the homeowners, the board, everybody, in terms of the cost to accomplish all these changes.
Okay, I'll give my input to that, unless anybody else can chime in.
I've thought about that, Ed, and did everyone hear the question? Okay. Okay. Basically, the question was, our CC&Rs have lots and lots of references to the declarant, who is the developer. And Ed's point was, why don't we just get together, go through all the CC&Rs and change everything all at once? He thinks that would be a less expensive and better way to do it. I have thought about that, and this I'm going to give you my opinion. I actually, respectfully, I disagree with you on that. The problem with trying to do things that way is that when you need, especially when you need this many votes, okay, to do anything, if we propose, 137 changes all at once, it's going to be such a hodgepodge that of things people like, things that people don't like, it makes it very difficult to vote. And I think the inevitable result would be nothing would happen. I think that it's actually much better to focus on things that, are important to the community and deal with them in small groups as they come up. Specifically with regard to the declarant, what I was reading between the lines of your question is, why don't we amend the CC&Rs and take the declarant out of everything? I don't actually think we can do it because there is language in the CC&Rs that reserves certain declarant rights that nobody can change without his approval. And there is like I said, I wasn't aware this was there. I actually just saw this one today. But it turns out our CC&Rs have a time period associated with them. I forget what it is right now. Maybe somebody else knows, but it's like 30. It's like 30 years, and then they automatically roll over for 10 years at a time, unless you get a vote of a majority of total homeowners to end the CC&Rs. Okay, so there's things like that in there, and what I found is a reference that the declarant retains certain rights for a period of at least 30 years. And and there are comments in there that also say certain sections cannot be amended without his approval. So the fact is, that's just what the law in Nevada allows developers to do. So, while as much as maybe we would all like to say the developer is totally free and clear, there are requirements like that. The flip side of that is, I don't know that he has any interest in being around here anymore. But anyway, that's not for me to decide.
the meantime, we still have house collection.
Yes.
Well, we do, but there's, like I say, if we put out 150 or 200 or 300 changes, nobody's gonna know what to do with those. I think it's much better to say, okay, we're gonna do this, you guys are gonna vote, you're either gonna approve it or not. If the next question is quorum, let's talk about that, let's make a change on that.
Both Ed and I are financial guys. And I was more along the lines of the same camp of thought, that we ought to take out the declarant entirely out of our CC&Rs. But in our calls with our attorney, conference calls with our attorney, he recommended just keeping it as simple as possible. Short list of issues is much more understandable, and I thought I agreed with that. So that's why we have this short list of, there's still references, if this vote passes, there'll still be references to the declarant, but hopefully they're not onerous elements in the remaining in CC&Rs.
Or to the degree that we could take them out, we could do that, I would think.
Yeah, that could be another set of changes if that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me? Okay, my name's Chuck Walker, and I've got a couple of comments. Before I give you the comments, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on my dealings with the association so I can create a little bit of credibility in what I say. My wife and I bought a lot here in 2005. We built a house and moved in at the end of 2006. Since 2007, I have been part of what's called the Gang of Five, which originally put ourselves together to check the checkers to make sure the developer wasn't taking us to the garden path. Ray Lee, Dan Kane, and myself in this room are part of that original group that started to figure out what should be done and not what was being done so we could monitor things and make sure we were protected. Tony and the three of us probably know more about the CC&Rs and the way a homeowners association runs from the inside, not from the IRS rules, but from the inside more than the rest of the group here combined. And I respect any of you that disagree with that. Okay. So, since that point, I've been involved with the homeowners association. I was on one of the original budget committees. I was part of the transition committee, but I'm currently the acting chairman of the strategic planning committee. And a lot of the issues that I see here tonight are issues that I've seen since my first interactions with the homeowners association and neighbors here in Somerset. They don't change. They just get more confused. They drill down to small issues. They really don't cover the major issues that we have, and that is having a successful organization. I want to touch base a little bit on contracts. In my former life as a corporate employee, I was not an attorney, but I had responsibility for contract administration implementation. I wrote the contracts. The attorneys didn't write the contracts for me. I wrote the contracts, and I sat down across the table from the attorney and said, this is what I need and the customer needs in the contract. Either tell me I can't do it, why, or write it the way it works. So I get real frustrated when I hear people say the attorney wrote the agreement. I don't buy that. We write the agreement. The attorney tells us what we have to have in that agreement to make it work. So I challenge the board to take a different perspective on that. Now my comments. I truly believe we need to change the CC&Rs. After having read them different times, I think I've read all of them, but I'm not really sure, frankly. They're horrible. They're not working documents that we can use. We need to change them. I'm a believer like Mr. Bauer and I never agree on anything. Mr. Hardy, I'm sorry, I apologize for that, sir. You don't have to mention anything. I was formed to hear his comments. Ray's things. Tony and I talk, and I respect Tony's position. But I think we need to come up with a complete set of CC&Rs that are workable rather than piecemealing it, because the piecemeal quick fix is not working. And there are not 187 changes you make in that document. You make one change. You have a replacement document which covers everything, and people look at document A or document B and say, which is the best for the association? And I truly believe that. I wouldn't be standing up here talking if I didn't believe that. What we're trying to do now is a quick fix. Once again, I support the need for changing the CC&Rs. I've supported the need, one of the original recommendations and one of the committees was to buy this piece of property over here. But frankly, I don't see buying that piece of property is going to change the way CC&Rs are administered in the town center. If the owners of those buildings right now are not cooperative, what's going to be different that they're going to cooperate? You've got the same tools of litigation, legal issues you go after now that you can if you own the property. I don't think that's a reason that we should use to buy the property. We should buy the property because it will benefit the association. We can use it effectively within the association. Just the same as all the other rules. I'm getting too wordy and I apologize for that. I support the need for a change in CC&Rs, but I would urge the board to withdraw the proposal and come up with a better proposal. And I put that in writing and sent it to Mr. Tony for review by the board.
I don't need that. My position is, you may be absolutely right, we may have to change a lot of the CC&Rs. This seems to me to be a very simple change. If we cannot get 51% of the homeowners to agree to this, to waste the money to go through and try to change all of the CC&Rs and get them all perfectly correct, and then get 51% of the vote, it is never going to happen. That's my opinion, and I'd like to compliment the board on what they've done so far.
So then I'll bring it to Carol.
Well, Chuck and I don't often disagree, but sometimes we do. And I think the two of us have sat at the majority of board members since 2006 and 2007, not missed many. Chuck and I served on the transition committee together, and this is a time I agree completely with Chuck. We need to look at the entire document, and that could start with an ad hoc committee with people that are knowledgeable of what's going on in the community, that have worked with CC&Rs in the past, and let's move forward in a very coordinated fashion.
I'm not here to tell you you should vote, or no, you will not. And it's quiet. I just want to compliment the board. I think that they have taken a bad rap since they were voted in. And I think that the majority of people in this community appreciates the efforts and hard work. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for all those comments. With regard to the issue of changing the CC&Rs, I've already told you my point of view. I've listened, and I do respect the points of view. This is an issue, I think, though, that if we really want to do it, it's still not clear to me that we can. So we probably need to look into the legal ramifications, because there are a number of parts of NRS that pay special recognition to the fact that the declarant was the guy who put all this stuff together, and it wouldn't have gotten put together without a person like that driving it, and they retain a number of rights over a period of time. So as much as we would like to change those things, it's not clear to me that we could substitute a whole new set of CC&Rs. We could get a legal opinion on that if there's enough interest in actually trying to pursue that. So maybe we could talk about that at a future board meeting or something like that.
I just have a question. If it does not pass, how many times can you decrease the vote?
There apparently is no actual limit. I think the reason, and I assume you're referring to the fact that there is language down there at the bottom of the ballot that reserves the right to extend the voting. Is that why you asked that question?
So I didn't know that.
Oh, well, there is language in there. Yeah, we know that right is extended. We had to do the same thing for the bond vote. That's not in there for the purpose of saying, gee, we're going to keep hammering this until we get it passed. It's really in for the purpose of saying, can't we even tell what people want by the number of votes that have come in? Okay? You know, if you know, for example, let's say the requirement is 51%, and before anybody jumps on me, okay, I'm trying to make an example. I'm not talking about when we actually open things and how we look at them and all that kind of stuff. Okay, this is a fake example, but to illustrate the problems with this kind of thing. Let's say you only got 40% of the homeowners to vote, but the votes that came in were running, you know, 99-1 in favor. What does that tell you? Is it that people want to make the change, but just a lot of people were too apathetic to vote, or not enough people wanted to make the change? So the idea of extending it is really to the point of getting an actual real vote, and then we'll do whatever that vote says. That's the whole point.
By extending it, if you vote once, and then you don't have half the 51%, then you submit it again to the same people have to vote again?
No. I mean, clearly, obviously, at some point, if we say it failed, there always is the option to redo it in the future, try to get it passed at some point in the future. You know, maybe change something or whatever. That's not where I mean, if it doesn't pass, we're not going to turn around immediately. I mean, we'll talk about what needs to happen at that point. What I was talking about is just like with the Moana thing. The Moana thing got confused. This is another part of our, one of our special cases. It says that our CC&R say, for the purpose of initiating or continuing litigation, we have to have a 50% plus one vote of all the eligible voters. Okay? I believe, I think, I may be wrong, because I don't remember exactly right now. I think there's also a requirement in there that you've got to give 90 days for that vote. Okay? But that one got extended because the first period was too short, and then ultimately we extended it out to 90 days. But the point is, we can extend the deadline if it looks like that will get us more votes. But we don't know what those votes are. Okay? But that's in there only to try to get to a quorum so that we know what people really want to do by whatever the votes say.
I've been to a few board meetings. I've lived here since 2004, but haven't been to a ton of these. So I'm neither pro or con on a lot of these issues. It's more fact-finding. So when I hear the discussion, and I've heard it about the adjacent property purchase, I'm seeing adversarial relationships pretty clearly. Why? I don't know what the origin is. It should be worked out. Everybody's an adult. So let's think about my questions, somebody who's not so intrinsically involved but has a concern. What are the projects that are in mind for the board currently? Starting with this, it sounds like it's a priority to get control over the town center. What additional projects follow that? The concern about, you know, we're all adults, we all enter into our homeowner purchase, making a decision, am I going to be a member of the country club, am I not going to be a member? And then the developer board put into place assessment basically, or took money from our general funds, as I understand it, and put things into place. So that's a concern of mine. A larger concern is that the golf course doesn't go under. You know, so it's kind of both sides of the argument. What are the ideas? And finally, on the proposed change of $500,000, it doesn't seem unreasonable to me. What does seem unreasonable is there's no limit annually or over a period of time of how many projects like that could be taken on.
Let me try to address some of those points if I can. First of all, on the issue of no limit, there kind of is, but it's an indirect limit. And that is, if we take on a big project, which causes us to use up our assessment, you know, whether the next project is under $500,000 or not, we don't have the capacity to do another one. Okay, so there's that kind of thing right there.
May I clarify on that point or ask a
Well, let me just continue, because we said we're going to try to give everybody a chance, but let me talk a little bit about the question of what projects is the board trying to do, or what do we see in the foreseeable future. I'm going to say 2-3 years out, okay? Right now, we've got, as everybody knows, we've been trying pretty much all year to renegotiate the deal with the golf course because it was a deal that basically left the association with nothing at the end. And we're trying to make that a better deal. As I said earlier, regardless of the vote on the CC&Rs, regardless of whatever, if there's a deal, homeowners will vote on it. So that's kind of a project, if you will, but it's totally up to you guys what happens with it. So I'm going to set that aside. Other than that, there's a couple of things. At the meeting at Aspen Lodge, there was actually quite a bit more discussion about the lot next door. So the only thing we've mentioned tonight is it would give us authority to enforce CC&Rs. That is one part. But it actually has a very strategic value to the association. So the association would like to get that lot. But what that value is the following. That lot has a very odd easement that runs across it that makes it basically unbuildable. And that's why pretty much all I know of at least 3 bidders that had accepted contracts who backed out during their due diligence because then they found out about this easement. Okay? But to us, it actually has value in that it can be parking lot. Because if you just put a sheet of asphalt over it and whoever has the easement needs to come in and dig it up, it's not a big deal to either dig it up or fix it. So why do we care about parking lot? Because if we ever want to expand this building, and as I understand, the Finance Committee right now is looking at least some options, that might in the longer term be ways to expand the exercise room and stuff like that. If we need to expand this building, we have to demonstrate that we have more parking to the city or they won't give us a building permit, as I understand. Okay, so that's why we really want that. So that would be something, that is something that's on the board's radar. We did try to buy it earlier this year. When all these other issues came up, we decided to wait and see, what happens with the CC&R changes and stuff before we do anything else on that. Other than that, that's a project, if you will. All I can say is that both the Strategic Planning Committee and the Finance Committee, which are both composed primarily of non-board member homeowners, are looking at various things. The survey said they need to look at, I know they're looking at things like exercise space. There was a big demand in the survey for additional aquatics at some point. Is that going to happen this year, next year? It's not going to happen this year. Probably won't happen next year. But those are the only projects. So those 4 things that I've mentioned from the survey that the committees are looking at, this lot, and whatever happens with the golf course, are the only projects that I foresee in the next 2 or 3 years or so. So that, does anybody have anything else to add to that? Is that okay?
Tony, the clarifying points that I would ask about the limit of projects, you answered clearly. So then the other issue that would come up is there are basically 2 ways we could have increase in assessments, which I don't get the feeling that the board's out to do this. Future boards, I doubt would want to do it. To your point earlier, they'd get canned quickly. But it could potentially, in worst case scenario, go up 15% plus 25% on assessment in a given year, correct? Mm-hmm. So those are things that somebody like myself would want to have addressed in the verbiage on this. Because the number, I don't get the sense, just like you noted, and I agree, I don't get the sense it's going to be just gangbusters trying to spend money. With a $4.5 million operation, we can't really do it at $500,000 a crack.
There really aren't that many projects out there that are feasible that would make sense for the association at this point. Okay. As it grows, we know we're going to need to expand. That's what the Finance Committee and the Strategic Planning Committee are starting to look at, but we'll have to wait to see what their recommendations are. I don't see any projects certainly this year, maybe not next year, but that's one of the reasons we're trying to get that change for the capital budgeting so we can start planning and building that into our budget so we don't need to make big assessment increases.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have one question about that lot. It's my understanding that when there's a legal easement that's certainly in the title report, that you wouldn't have the right to really do anything with that. You can't just put a parking lot on there. You have to get a legal opinion of what could be done, and you've got to get the easement holder to agree to allow that, because my understanding, and I've done a lot of legal contract work, as Chuck has, and my understanding is if there's an easement there, you don't trespass on it. For any reason.
No, well, I mean, respectfully, I've looked into that a little bit, and the answers that I got are somewhat different. We've got easements going all over Somerset in various places, where the golf courses are and stuff like that. My understanding is that basically, if you put something over an easement, and whoever has the right to that easement wants to get to it, if they need to get to their conduit or whatever down there, they've got the right to basically tear up anything you've put, and they don't have to fix it again. So as a practical matter, that's why you're not going to put a building over an easement. But in terms of a parking lot or a golf course or something like that, that's something that is relatively easy to repair and relatively low cost to repair if somebody came in. So that's why I'm saying it's usable, but that's my understanding of how it would work with an easement. So,
When we looked at that lot,
We took a look at the easements. The easement is a sewer easement. And the sewer easement is like any sewer easement in the street or if you've got to go into your yard. It's not the same as the easement that the pipeline or the railroad or the utility or the electric company have. It's not as, it doesn't encumber you as much as those. So based upon our original look at it, and I think, Ray, I don't remember, did we talk to the attorney on it? But it wasn't something that was impossible for a parking lot or an athletic field. But it really, you didn't really want to put a building on it.
Right, exactly.
So that's why it has no limited use, or limited value.
Right. And again, like I said, we need it if we want to expand here, because they don't let us expand without adding parking.
That's a good question.
You have to hold it pretty close.
Okay. My understanding of the NRS requirements on the authority of the board to increase 15% is that has to be built into the budget for the forthcoming year.
Sure.
And the 25% has to include that 15% should you make that assessment in the year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about the last part. The part about building it into the budget is absolutely true. That's what I was saying earlier, that none of these rules stand alone. So it's pretty hard. You can't really do this without people knowing about it. I am not clear on my reading of the NRS, and again, I may not have the right interpretation, but the authority was a special assessment up to 25% of the aggregate annual assessment. So take your monthly assessment multiplied by 12, and you can do a special assessment that's up to a quarter of that. Whether that includes the 15% increase, your question basically, if you want to increase both at the same time. I'm not sure if the 15% counts toward the 25 or not.
My understanding is that it does, but regardless, it seems, my point is that you have to plan ahead and to know what projects you're getting into.
Exactly.
And so it's not going to be a surprise to anyone.
Exactly, that's my point. The other thing is, because you'll see special projects in our budget, which are special projects for our existing facilities. And there's a list and there's a dollar amount, they don't exactly correspond, but we're not allowed to do, except for emergencies, we can't suddenly do projects that weren't identified in the budget. So there are all kinds of checks and balances like that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm not clear. I don't think necessarily that the purchase of this property is affected by what we do or do not do, whether we approve or don't approve the CC&Rs. I personally think we should buy it, okay? And I know the previous board budgeted, what was it, $250,000 to put into the Club of Town Center special projects, specifically to buy that property. And we were unsuccessful in doing it because we were outbid. But at the last board meeting, I believe you guys took that money and put it into the reserves.
Which is what the previous board did with it at the end of their term, but we couldn't actually put it did it was so we didn't have cash.
Okay, but my point is, I think it's a good idea to buy it. And do we have to have these CC&Rs passed in order to do that?
Well, the answer is, if they pass, okay,
The answer is if they pass, then there's absolutely no question that we can buy it. If they don't pass, then we have the ambiguity that we're trying to clarify with this that leads to things like maybe we can buy it, maybe we can't. We can buy it if we get the developer's permission, but we can't bring it into the association without his permission. Okay, because, I mean, that's another point right there, because right now, that lot is actually part of town center. So if we were to buy it, it is not actually a common element. For us to make use of it, even if it's just paving it over as parking lot, to spend association money on it, we need to bring it in as a common element, which means we need the authority to annex it into our part of Somerset.
Okay, now I'm
Yeah. So the issue is, the bottom line is, Jim, to answer your question is, if we pass these changes, then there's no question we can buy it, we can bring it in, and we can use it.
Okay, but we made an offer on it earlier this year.
Excuse me, this meeting is being on the CC&Rs, not the purchase of land. And I'd like
okay, well, I mean, that's a good point.
stay focused on that.
Well, does anybody have any other comments or questions about the CC&R? Then, what I would suggest, oh, it's right at 7 o'clock, that's pretty much exactly what we said. So, why don't we do this, we'll go ahead and adjourn the CC&R meeting, and if anybody else has any questions or